Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Box Out Podcast, episode 2, here with your host, Jaden Taylor. Jrue Holiday to the Celtics up next. And are they the title favorites out of the East? FanDuel says maybe, but I'll give you an answer here on the Box Out Podcast. Cue the music. Once again, thank you for tuning in here to the Box Out Podcast. Jrue Holiday to the Celtics. Does this make them the title favorites out of the East? Well, on FanDuel, it has them at even odds with the Bucks now at plus 380. The Denver Nuggets, who, by the way, just won the NBA championship with, by the way, two-time MVP Nikola Jokic at plus 550. Phoenix Suns at plus 550 as well. Los Angeles Lakers plus 1,300 and Golden State Warriors at plus 1,700, which I think is debatable there on the Warriors, but nonetheless, the Nuggets should be the same odds, I think, as the Bucks and Celtics at the very least for NBA title odds. So if you're a Nuggets fan out there, I would probably go ahead and place your bets before Jokic starts looking like Jokic, and January we're reminded, oh, okay, they're real contenders too. And by we, I mean the national audience. But between the Bucks and Celtics, those plus 380 odds, I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to have to give the title favorites between those two. I think it's the Celtics. They should be favored coming out of the East. And here's why. Jrue Holiday is a perfect matchup in a sense. I mean, Damian Lillard, he's one of those superstars who he's going to get his shots off, at least what we've seen in Portland, and he's probably going to get his numbers regardless. But the idea, right, is to make him as inefficient as possible. And going back through and looking at Lillard's numbers against Holiday in 23 career games, for the most part, Lillard's had fine stats, 25 points, 43% from the field, 35% from three. He's been fine. There was that famous Pelicans series when Holiday was on the Pelicans that him and Rondo probably played some of the best perimeter defense against him, and he struggled somewhat in that series. But I don't think the Celtics traded for Jrue Holiday because he's an automatic Dame stopper. Now, if that's a byproduct, of course, that's great, but I don't think they're expecting Jrue Holiday to go in there and make Damian Lillard look like he's a rookie. They got him for a multitude of reasons. Yes, he will be a good matchup defender against Damian Lillard, but there's screens, there's all sorts of other stuff and factors that go into stopping a superstar like Damian Lillard. They got him because in the playoffs, you're only as good as your weakest link on the perimeter. And for as much havoc as Damian Lillard and Giannis pick and rolls and Lillard pull up threes off screens and maybe even some drives into the basket, he will equally be causing his own team havoc on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know how many Blazers games you were watching last year, but the ones that you would tune into, you'd see Lillard getting his numbers, and then you'd also see him getting cooked on defense. You know why? It's because he's never been that great of a defender, but it's been fine because he's puts up a whole lot of points, and to be honest, he's never really had championship expectations on a team he's been on. The closest thing he's sniffed to an NBA championship is the conference finals in 2018-2019, in which he lost in 5 games to the Warriors, which no shame in losing to those Warriors teams, but he didn't look that great in the series anyways. He put up 22 points a game, shot 37% from the field and 37% from three. Go check his defensive rating stats from last season. He ranked dead last in defensive rating with 120.8. Trae Young did better than him somehow with 119.2. So you're not just gaining the 30 points a game or 25 points a game or whatever he averages for Milwaukee without giving up a lot of points back the other way. You ever heard of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Bucks fans, Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis? These are all talented people that can put the ball in the basket, and Tatum, on the hinges of a top 5 player, as he's entering his prime years here, 26 through 28. That's whenever you start to see some of the best players in the league start to capture an NBA championship. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, the list goes on. A lot of NBA greats don't win their championships until they hit these prime years. And Tatum he's going to look to be the next one. Up next, quit with the overreactions on this trade. People on Bucks subreddits as well as Celtics subreddits just going back and forth, NBA subreddits as well as Twitter too, going back and forth on how Portland walked up and robbed the Celtics blind of everything, and it wasn't that at all. I'll tell you why in one moment here on the Box Out Podcast. Now, why is this a good deal for both sides? Obviously, Portland doesn't need Jrue Holiday. That's pretty simple. They just drafted Scoot Henderson. They have Shaedon Sharpe. It doesn't fit their timeline. There's nothing about Jrue Holiday on the Portland Trailblazers that makes any sense. So that in and of itself is a positive for Portland. And then to get back Rob Williams, who would be a depth piece behind DeAndre Ayton, and he's proven that he probably shouldn't be your starting center because he's never played more than 50 or 60 games. By the way, those are 2 seasons. Every other season has been less than those. But he's cheap, and he's obviously a great defender, and he can be a change of pace for DeAndre Ayton / injury insurance, oddly enough, for Ayton, I guess. And they can always trade him again, eventually. Now, Brogdon, he also comes with injuries, and he also is more of a backcourt player in that 2-to-1 role. So he might be the third guard that gets traded from Portland. The Blazers also got a first-round pick that comes from Golden State, but it's protected 1 through 4. And I don't think the Warriors are going to be bad barring any injuries, so it'll probably be a late pick anyways. And then they also get a 2029 Boston unprotected pick. And it just really doesn't matter now because at the end of the day, we don't know how injuries are going to play out over the next 5 or 6 years. In so many different ways this can all go about. So I'm not even going to try to tell you, the Celtics, no matter what, can't be bad in 2029. But at the same time, you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, who are both hitting their peaks now and theoretically shouldn't be absolutely nothing by the time 2029 rolls around. Or they could be somehow moved on and there's other pieces that come back for them and that keeps the Celtics afloat. There's just so much unpredictability. But regardless, I think that might be the most valuable asset to them outside of what they could get back for Rob or Brogdon in a trade now. All in all, I think it's an even deal. The Celtics get to try to go all in on this team with Porzingis and Tatum and Brown, and the Blazers get future assets, essentially, with Robert Williams being a trade piece / young, good player, and those first-round picks. And that's what the Blazers want. They're not trying to win in 2023, 24, and maybe not even 25. This really just leaves me with my own question, which is, are we done trading NBA players here before the start of the regular season, or am I going to come back on this podcast with another crazy trade? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Up next, I'm going to tell you why Holiday fits with the Celtics better than Marcus Smart and why other teams couldn't beat out what the Celtics had to offer and what that means for their upcoming season here on the Box Out Podcast. Now, when this trade was done, I didn't even think that anyone could have the opinion that this isn't an upgrade over Marcus Smart, but it's true. It's part of the online NBA discourse right now, and I have to tell you, it's very clear to me that Holiday is a huge upgrade over Smart. Now, I know Smart wasn't the one that was dealt to Portland, but clearly from last season to this season, that's who he's directly replacing. And when you go and compare them, okay, clearly they're both great defensive players. Marcus Smart even winning the Defensive Player of the Year. But Holiday, he's 5 times all defense, first team last season, and has been on the DPOY balance the last 3 years. Now, go look on the offensive side of the ball, and here's where you're going to see some real separation. Marcus Smart, his true shooting percentage last year, 53.8. That's 26th percentile. Not good at all. Holiday true shooting, 58.6. That's 57th percentile. Way better. Holiday 3-point percentage. The last 3 years, 39%, 41, and 38 on 5 to 6 attempts a game. Smart, his career, and essentially the last 3 seasons as well, 32%. Holiday, 7.4 assists to Smart's 6.3. Those are 3 very important categories that are all clear upgrades. Look at their defensive win shares to harp back on how they're similar defensively. 2.8 win shares last season for Holiday, 2.7 for defensive win shares for Smart last season. Now go look back on the offensive side of the ball again. Offensive win shares, 3.9 last season, 4.5 the year prior for Holiday, and Smart, 1.0 last year and 1.9 the year prior. It's right there. It says it in the numbers. It says it in the eye test. If you've watched Marcus Smart play basketball for as long as I have, which, by the way, has been quite a long time. And I don't mean for this to sound like Marcus Smart hate. He's a great guy. He does great things off the court. He plays super hard on the court. And he stepped up last year in that point guard role, even though it's not truly, I think, who he is at his heart. But it's so evidently clear to me, based off the numbers and based off the eye test, that Jrue Holiday is a way better upgrade over Marcus Smart. And this is what unlocks, I think, the Celtics offense, is the ability to go 5 out with Jrue Holiday there at the point, giving them that great perimeter defense. Smart, he was the person in most lineups that teams were begging to shoot threes. If you got a Marcus Smart 3, here and there, he was going to go off and he was going to hit some. But for the most part, you live with Marcus Smart 3s when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are on the floor. The craziest part about that 5 out, too, is that they don't give up any size in the sense of having Porzingis and Horford out there as well. And that's going to make for interesting matchups around the league. And if you have to, you can even throw Derek White out there as well and have Horford come off the bench, giving you even more quickness if need be. Now, what does this mean for the teams that didn't get Jrue Holiday that certainly wanted him, like the Sixers and the Heat and the Clippers? I'll start with the Heat. It doesn't bring me any surprises because it essentially came back down to the same problem that they had with the Dame Lillard trade, in that they just don't need anybody from their roster. They don't need Tyler Hero, and he's their best asset that they would probably give up. Even if Miami throws in the extra first-round pick and makes it 3 first-round picks, like I'm sure they wanted, it doesn't change the fact that it just isn't a good fit, anything they get back from them, nor equal value as far as player-wise. So now it seems, unless something suddenly changes, that the Heat are going to roll out Lowry, Hero, Butler, Kevin Love, and Bam Adebayo. And yeah, they play great basketball down the stretch of the playoffs, but to bet on them doing that again isn't realistic. And you know the Heat believe it because they were trying to trade for Dame Lillard, and they were trying to trade for Jrue Holiday, and they swung and missed. By the way, they lost 2 starters as well, Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. But oddly enough, as a Celtics fan, I think they still are a little bit of the boogeyman syndrome, in the sense that the Heat, for whatever reason, have a way of making games gross to watch, but it's perfect for them. And so I still, as a Celtics fan, don't want to see them in the playoffs against the Celtics, but there's no conceivable way you could convince me that they're going to make the same run they did last year. Why couldn't the Sixers get them? Well, they, like Miami, just don't really have the pieces to offer. They're not offering Maxey, and even if they did, it wouldn't make sense because Portland, again, is trying to develop guards. And nothing would make Daryl Morey happier than giving up James Harden for Jrue Holiday, but that just clearly wasn't in the picture either. And at that point, you're left with trading away Tobias Harris, which I think Sixers fans would be in favor of, but it's just not what, again, the Blazers want, clearly. And so I think that's really left the Sixers in limbo here, as Harden's not showing up to training camp, at least yet. It doesn't seem like he's going to finish the season on the 76ers. And so we'll have to see what they get in return for him, but they couldn't be that much for a guy that's quit on 2 teams in 3 years and wants hundreds of millions of dollars in a contract extension and could very well quit your team too. On top of his lackadaisical playoff performances at times, and his defense obviously leaving much to be desired, and his drives to the basket haven't looked as good in recent years either. I think most teams are good on James Harden, especially at his ripe age of 34. It'll be interesting to see who Daryl Morey can try to sucker into taking Harden and what they can get back. The Clippers, another team in on the Jrue Holiday sweepstakes, but like the other 2 teams, just really didn't have anything to give them. They could have tried to send Portland a deal centered around Terrence Mann, but again, with the guards in Portland, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to trade for Terrence Mann. And outside of Kawhi and Paul George, who clearly are untouchable, there's nothing else player-wise that the Blazers would really want as far as assets. And so you're really only getting the picks at that point, and even then, nothing's guaranteed with those picks. The Celtics, at least, gave the Blazers valuable assets in player form and valuable assets in picks. And that's why they were able to make the deal happen, and why Brad Stevens, at least for now, is looking like maybe the best GM in the league in an offseason where he turned Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Rob Williams into Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday. The final topic for the podcast, the Denver Nuggets, and why we can't forget about them in all of this. Now look, I'm not going to do a 10-minute rant here on why Jokic is so good, because we all know why he's so good. He can pass, he can shoot, he gets his teammates involved. Him and Murray have such a good 1-2 punch, and he makes it all look easy. But the core of the Nuggets is still the same. You'll definitely miss out on the energy and defense of Bruce Brown, but at the same time, I can't imagine that Brown is the player that makes the Nuggets juice not all work right. But I think that they have the same argument that a lot of past NBA champions have, in that, hey, if you want to be the man, you've got to beat the man. And no, it's not pro wrestling, so that doesn't mean that a basketball team has to quite literally go through the Nuggets to win the championship, but the saying still serves a purpose in that nothing happened to the Nuggets. Nothing negative happened to the Nuggets besides losing Bruce Brown, and like we've already covered, I can't imagine that's the difference maker. So why aren't the Nuggets favored? I can tell you why. It's recency bias. We all do it. You know what's better than your car now? The new one that you want to go buy eventually. The biggest thing you see with recency bias is when things are reported as the best, the greatest of all time even. Whatever it is, whether it be food, movie, TV show, or a basketball player. And the truth is, 99% of the time, it isn't. You know what life is more like? It's normal. When things are really, really good like the Nuggets, they don't oftentimes just disappear. And it would be silly for anyone to not consider the Nuggets still the title favorites out of the West and probably the title favorites overall. And I don't think that can be changed until the man has been beaten. Thank you for listening in to the Box Out Podcast episode number 2. Make sure to tune in for episode 3 on Thursday. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, do whatever. Follow us on the Box Out Pod on Instagram. Subscribe to us on our YouTube, the Hotspot Sports Network, which is where this podcast will live there. And also can find us on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Thanks for listening. Cue the music.